Our aims for this session is that it will work for both those who are experienced judges to this competition, but also those who are completely new. So for those of you who do have a bit of experience or have been helping us for years and years, this will hopefully act as a bit of a refresher, especially since this is our first year doing competitions in person since COVID. So we're really excited about that as we start to get back a little bit more to normal. So yeah, we want everybody to come away from this session feeling confident and capable enough to judge their regional final heats. We want to ensure that everyone has a grounded understanding in Shakespeare, public speaking and acting, because this competition encompasses all of those things. And to have a bit of clarity around the judging matrix, what it is that we're judging students on, how to mark consistently and fairly. And we're also going to highlight really important information about safeguarding. So there's just a little schedule there, the sort of things we're going to be talking about. I'm going to provide some information about the competition as a whole and what it means to students. As I just mentioned, the important safeguarding information, which is really crucial to what we do here. And then Jen will step in and do the more exciting stuff about Shakespeare as a figure and what he means to modern audiences, and more sort of information on the judging matrix. And finally, we'll end with a Q&A session. So if there's anything that we didn't quite cover or something you'd like a bit more clarity on, then would be the opportunity to go through that. So the Performance Shakespeare competition then encompasses lots of different things and brings lots of different benefits to students. I would argue that this is our most inclusive and accessible competition. We've actually seen the number of state schools involved in this double in the past year. So that to me signals that this is a channel for social mobility, and it helps students who are on free school meals have an opportunity, more so than our other two competitions, I believe, because Shakespeare is on the national curriculum. Every student is going to have some sort of aspect of familiarity with it. And our competition allows them to further explore that and like tease out those ideas that they've been learning about in class. It's our only competition for years 7 to 9. And what we find is that students who enter into this then go on to take part in our debate and public speaking, because they've got the confidence to do that, having taken part in this and like having a bit of experience of like competitive levels of oracy. It's different in that it combines acting with public speaking. So whereas, say, our other two competitions are a bit more focused, this is combining both, because not only do students have to act, they also have to introduce their performance in the form of a speech. So we're developing a lot of different skills, and we've tried to do that by building in our 4 key skill sets, which we've designed and put together here at the SU. You can find out more about those on our website, but they include listening and response, expression and delivery, organisation and prioritisation, and reasoning and evidence. And you'll be able to see a little bit more about how the competition deals with all of those when Jen goes on to talk later about the judging side of things specifically. Being an English graduate, one of my favourite things about this is that obviously it does bring the arts to life, because while it's good that students can learn about Shakespeare in the classroom, ultimately these are plays that are meant to be watched and performed, and they're not just meant to be read and revised and studied. This is what they're meant for, and I think it's really fantastic that we're all helping students to do just that. And something that I find really interesting as well is that his plays deal with such fundamental issues that are still relevant in today's world. So students can examine Shakespeare's treatment of key social issues like sex and gender, religion, race, class. He deals with love and bereavement and other things that bring humanity together. They're really universal issues. And even though he was writing in the 1500s and 1600s, these themes still remain relevant today. And for many students, his plays will provide them with a space of exploration, and there'll be an invitation for them to think about themselves and their place in the world. Jen will go on to talk more about this later as well. I think it's also important that we bear in mind that Shakespeare deals with sometimes quite sensitive and often very complex themes, and this will mean different things to different students, which you'll see more about when they come to do their oracy components. So I think it's worth bearing that in mind. So here's some more practical information then on how the regional finals will actually be organised. So we have 13 different regions across the UK, and that's in both Wales and England. So each different region will each have one regional final, and one student will progress from that regional final to the grand final. There are 3 rounds in total, this obviously being the second round. The first round would have taken place across January and February in schools. So we permitted teachers then to progress 1 or 2 students from their school, or like 1 or 2 entries rather, to go through to the regional final. That was completely done through them. So gradually we're receiving the details of those performances now. So we'll know by the time these regional finals take place, whether we've got monologues, duologues, the characters, plays, acts and scenes being performed, which will allow us to better prepare and sort of put an MC script overview together, which I'm going to work on. Now, before the actual competitive element takes place, Jen or another actor or actress will deliver a 1-hour workshop. So not only is this going to act as a warm-up and icebreaker for the students, but it's also going to allow them to receive really valuable insight and knowledge from a really qualified individual, which is a really exciting opportunity for them, I think. Then there will probably be a short break or an opportunity for lunch, depending on the time the heat's taking place. And then the competition will begin. So each entry is permitted 5 minutes in total. Obviously, sometimes that does run over or other entries might come under. But generally, we sort of give a guideline of 2 minutes for the oracy component, which is where they'll introduce their piece and why they've chosen it, what it means to them, any sort of connections they have with it, and any key decisions that they've made in their acting and performance. This shouldn't be a summary of the scene they're doing. We don't want to know what they're about to do. We want to know why they're doing it. It should explain. And then obviously they're going to move into the performance itself, which should take about 3 minutes. Then, as I say, one performance will progress from each regional final to the final. And that can often be very hard to decide, I think, from what I've heard. But even if there is a really obvious winner, it's important that in your deliberation with the other judges, everyone is given fair consideration. So even if you know that someone isn't necessarily going to progress, that student or that like pair of students still have to be given really valuable feedback so they can improve. They should still come away from it feeling like they've learned something, even if they haven't progressed. And therefore, it's also important to really deliberate with the other judges and like take their opinions into consideration, because there might be times where not everybody agrees. And then once the winner is announced, then students will be given general feedback in front of everyone. So at that point, you can't call out specific students, even if you're saying something they did particularly well or something to improve on. That is then sort of left for specific feedback, should they want it after that. So now we move on to the safeguarding policy. So all of the notes I've taken here came from our policy, which can be found on our website, and which everyone will get sent around after this. This does obviously deal with sensitive information, just as a warning to anybody. Safeguarding is basically our commitment to young people and vulnerable adults. It's important that we talk about this because as a charity that works with young people, it does shape everything that we do. And we do obviously have a commitment to it. So we're just wanting to protect young people from harm or damage with appropriate measure. So good safeguarding then is everybody's responsibility. Even if you only judge one heat or have like limited interaction with the students in that heat, it is still also your responsibility, because it's only by making it everybody's responsibility that we can have the best safeguarding policy that we can. Everyone brings a different piece of the puzzle. Someone might notice one thing, someone else might notice another. It's only by combining all these different parts that we're able to protect young people in the best way that we can. Which is why I've said that good safeguarding is, preventative, proactive, and part of all practice. It's always got to sort of be ticking away in the back of our minds. So if you hear something or see something that gives you reason to believe that a student might be at risk, has been at risk, or will be put at risk, you must report that to one of the SU's designated safeguarding leads immediately. Even if you think it's you being paranoid or you're not 100% sure, you have still got to say something, because we would really much rather you come to us and have it be nothing than for it to get swept under the rug and then for it to spiral into something bigger later on that we could have prevented if someone had spoken up sooner. In terms of judging or MCing specifically, we must emphasize that judges are never alone with students. There's always got to be another responsible adult present, and that after or before, during the heat, wherever, judges must have no communication with the students online. So this includes social media and email, and you obviously can't exchange like phone numbers or anything either. If a student tries to make contact with you, whether that be following you on social media or like any sort of interaction online at all, you must also report that to us and block the student's profile. So we're trying to maintain professional boundaries. We're only going into these seats in a professional capacity, and that must always be upheld. So dealing with disclosures. A disclosure is when a student volunteers information to you which tells you that they're at risk, so that they might tell you something personal that's happened to them. So even in this situation, we still do not take a child into a room alone with us. You might choose to sit apart from the other people in the group with another responsible adult present, but you still cannot be alone with them. So with this, it's important to listen carefully, obviously, and show sensitivity. You've got to show that you believe the student, because if you show disbelief, it's only going to sort of harbour distrust in adults and will make that student question why they ever came forward and might deter them from ever coming forward again. So we always show that we believe the student and listen with empathy. It's important that you don't ask specific leading questions, because this might trigger unpleasant memories for the student and might make them feel uncomfortable. So obviously any information that we have is valuable, but if you do want to find out a bit more, or it'd be useful to find out a bit more, we suggest saying, as I've stated there, could you tell me a little bit more about that, please? Because that leaves it open. And if the student doesn't want to, it's important not to push that. And even though we're gonna, like in this situation, the things that we're told might be shocking and they're likely going to be very upsetting, we can't let our own emotions come across too strongly. If a child tells you about an abuser or a potential abuser, you can't talk badly about that person or show disgust, because this might be a family member, and that student might then want to go on to defend that family member. So it's all about sort of catering towards their emotions rather than involving our own too strongly. It's also vital not to have physical contact with students. So even if a student, gets visibly upset and starts crying, not to hug them or like physically comfort them. And as I've put at the bottom here, you can never promise to keep a secret. So if a child comes up and says, oh, I've got something to tell you, but only if you say not to tell anyone else, you have got to say that, unfortunately, you are going to have to tell a few people, because that's in everyone's best interest and is the way that you can best help them. If you promise to keep a secret, for one, we know that we can't. We have to tell a designated safeguarding lead, and that will further harbour distrust in adults. So yeah, just thank them for telling you and say that you're going to use the information to best help them. Our key contacts then for safeguarding are Gavin Ilsley. He's our designated safeguarding lead. So these slides will all be sent around with their contact details, and also Matthew Christmas, who's our deputy designated safeguarding lead. So we ask that you email or call immediately if a concern comes up, and Gavin or Matthew will deal with it appropriately and in a timely manner as well. So the last bit from me then, I've talked a lot about what we would like from you, but just a little bit on what you can expect from us. So we hope that this opportunity provides you with the chance to connect with like-minded people who are interested in the arts and share a passion for developing the oracy skills of young people. As I've mentioned, I'm willing to provide ongoing support throughout the process, so any question at all, you can send over to me and I will try my best to help. In terms of career development, we're helping develop key skills, particularly communication and leadership, and I'm also happy to provide references to CVs. And there's also the prospect of other opportunities from the English speaking union as well, so you might choose to go and judge some of our other competitions or become an oracy mentor or something of the like. And not to mention watching Shakespeare performances for free, no less. As an exciting little bit that I'm looking forward to. So yeah, now I'm going to hand over to Jen then to talk about Shakespeare and judging in a little bit more depth.
Thank you, Jessica. So hello, everybody. As Jess said, my name is Jen. I'm an actor and a director. I'm based just outside Stratford-upon-Avon here in Warwickshire. And as you can possibly tell from all of the resource material behind me, I'm a little bit of a Shakespeare geek. So hopefully we'll be able to give you some really good guidelines today and a really positive start to the next round of this fantastic competition. So William Shakespeare. It is very, very easy to see William Shakespeare as well this kind of black and white sketch in a history book, as a 2D character, as somebody consigned to history and somebody who doesn't have particular relevance to us today. Like me, I'm sure many of you had a first experience of Shakespeare sat in a classroom, probably when you're about 13 years old in September, gazing out of the window, remembering the summer holiday and the sand between your toes, and in comes your enthusiastic teacher who delightfully declares that this term you will be studying Shakespeare, and collectively 13-year-olds all go, Well, we're hoping that our introduction to Shakespeare for these young people will be something really positive and really excite them and inspire them to take their Shakespearean studies further. Now, this is probably stating the obvious, but as a judge of a competition that is primarily about Shakespeare and his works, it's really, really useful for you to know a little bit of background information about Mr. William Shakespeare. So he was born in 1564 in Stratford-upon-Avon. The exact date is unknown, but we celebrate his birthday on the 23rd of April, along with St. George's Day. And in Stratford, that's a day that is renowned for great celebrations across the town. Stratford is here in Warwickshire. It's a lovely town on the edges of the River Avon, and if you haven't been, then do please head up in this direction now that we're allowed out of our homes a little bit and have a visit, because it really is a lovely place to be. He died on his birthday, scandalously. The urban myth is that he went out on a drinking session with some of his friends, caught a terrible cold, and then died a few days later. And when you've got a man who's created characters such as Falstaff, I think that's probably the most appropriate way for him to have gone, really. He's also known as the Bard of Stratford-upon-Avon, and many of his works have been taken on and turned into films. Obviously, at the moment, we've got West Side Story and the reimagining of that's on our big screens at the moment, but also in Stratford and in other places, the Globe, the Barbican, all sorts of different venues, outdoor touring venues where you can go and sit with your bottle of wine and enjoy some outdoor Shakespeare. There have been some fantastic reimaginings of Shakespeare's plays, and ways of updating the plays and making them more relevant, blind casting, inclusive casting. Fantastic things are happening within the world of William Shakespeare at the moment, and it's really important for us to remember how relevant, and as Jess mentioned, that some of the subjects that he deals with are really, really sensitive. Death, birth, life, love, loss, grief, all of these fantastic and huge human emotions William Shakespeare deals with. And from my point of view, as a complete Shakespeare geek, what I love most about him is the fact that he comes from the viewpoint of somebody that is observing human nature. And when you look a little bit at William Shakespeare's life and the events that are taking place in his life, you can see them reflected in his plays. So it's interesting to note that when he was writing Romeo and Juliet, his own daughter Susanna was 12 years old. So even though in his life the circumstances of the arguments between Juliet and her dad weren't necessarily reflective of his own experiences, certainly the voice of a father and daughter in those plays is really, really strong. And also, when he wrote Hamlet, it's not about the death of his son, which is something that did occur in his life, but at the same time, he was struggling with the death of his own father, who was such a huge character in Stratford. So when we look at his life and the events of his life, they become intertwined with the circumstances of his plays and the stories in his plays. He's also writing for the winners. So when Elizabeth I loved the character of Falstaff, he created Merry Wives of Windsor. And when James I took over the throne, James I was absolutely obsessed with witchcraft. And at the same time, Shakespeare presented his production of Macbeth, which we know was performed at Hampton Court in front of James I. So he's a clever playwright who's writing for the winners and making sure that his plays keep going on. And obviously 450 years later, we are still studying them. So if we move on to the next slide, here are just a few fun facts about Shakespeare that you might enjoy. But whilst you're reading through those, it's really, really important to note that you are going to see quite a variation and a number of extracts from Shakespeare's plays. You're also going to see a lot of repetition. So in these regional finals, expect to see a lot of Helena and Hermia, Juliet and the Nurse, possibly a little bit of Romeo and Juliet and what's often referred to as the balcony scene, although there is no balcony in it at all, it's just a window. So there will be a lot of similarities in the performances that you're going to see, and it's really important that you judge each one of them on their own individual merit. So take some time to think about the performance of the individual participant and not necessarily comparing it too much with one of the same that you've seen earlier. So you'll see a lot of similarities, but every now and again, one of these students might really surprise you and pick something that you're really not expecting. So it's really, really important that perhaps you've taken some time just to look at a broad spectrum of Shakespeare's plays and be familiar with perhaps even just a synopsis of each one of them. So that if suddenly something comes from Titus Andronicus or a little bit of Kate and Petruchio that you may not be expecting, that at least you know the synopsis of the play and where these characters fit within the play. Because whilst I said you will see a lot of similarities, every now and again somebody will really surprise you by their choice. And these young people are incredible. They come from all sorts of different backgrounds and may well pick something that you're not expecting at all. So do take your time to have a little bit of a kind of rummage through some of Shakespeare's plays. And whilst there are the really famous and standout titles, every now and again one of our young people really might surprise you, so it is worth just taking time and doing that. I know we're expecting a lot of you, but it will make you a much more effective and positive judge. So moving on to the next slide, we have to remember that within this competition, it's not all about the performance of Shakespeare's words. So a really, really important aspect of these young people's performances is actually their introduction to what they're going to perform for you on the day. And here we can see Churchill's Guide to Public Speaking. And these are some really important and useful headlines to think about when these young people are making their introductions to you. So preparation, have they taken time to prepare what they're saying? Have they overlooked how important this aspect of the performance is in their preparation? Do they know more about the play than just the surface text and just their extract that they're performing for you today? How are they presenting their introduction to the play? Are they standing confidently? Are they smiling at you? Are they bringing you, the audience, into their performance? And are they thinking about how they're performing this aspect in the same way as they would the actual Shakespearean extract that they're going to perform for you later? Personality is really, really important. And a little bit later, we're going to show you one of our past winners. And I think this will really ring true when you see his introduction, because he has got a lot of personality and he really brings that out in his introduction. And then he takes that forward into the rest of his performance. It's a really, really lovely example of a really, really personable and characterful young participant. And finally, confidence. Are they standing and delivering to you with confidence without being overconfident? Are they introducing it to you in a way that gives you that feeling that you are in safe hands, that their performance that will follow will be something that you can almost sit back, relax and enjoy? But don't get too comfortable, because remember, you do need to take a lot of notes as we go along. So as we move on to the next slide, we then need to think about how you're judging the performance. If
I'm just going to try messaging Jen a sec, because she's frozen for me.
So it's really important to remember that our judges have to remain neutral. So it's very, very subjective, and each judge will, of course, respond very differently to each of the performances. The judge's decision is, of course, final, but you as a judge need to be willing to stand up for your favourite, but also to compromise. You need to remain completely neutral, and you need to make sure that you don't have an obvious affiliation with any of the participating schools or any of the participants. If you feel that there is a conflict of interest, then you need to say as early as possible, because early disclosures of any potential conflicts mean that we can deal with those quickly and effectively, and we can protect the integrity of the competition and ensure that it is fair for all of our competitors. You need to rate each performance individually and on their own merit. And then when you've viewed all of the performances, you need to make sure that you give each one of them equal time in the judges' conversation that you have afterwards. But you also need to remember that parents and all sorts of things waiting at the end of the day, and to keep those arguments and those discussions and those lively debates as swift as you possibly can. Now, gender diversity and clothing are something that we take seriously within the performances, but also you need to remember that the competition is not gendered in any way. Our young people may feel an association, a link, a relationship with any of these characters, and it doesn't matter what gender they are able to perform any of those characters. And you need to remember that whilst fight scenes are performed by male characters, and we might find that a lot of boys are taking part in those kind of scenes, it's equally fine for one of our female participants to take on one of those roles, and that we must remember that this is a very broad competition, and that gender shouldn't really play a part in anything that we're doing. Race, religion, ethnicity, gender, we need to make sure that we're not really taking these into account or commenting on any of these: socio-economic background, clothes, hair, accents, physical qualities, unless they're referred to by the participant in their introduction. Again, these really, really shouldn't be taken much into account when we are judging these performances. We ask our participants to wear black or dark, comfortable clothing. And again, their clothing is not relevant in any of their performances. So please make sure that what you're concentrating on is what they're delivering and not what they're wearing. We do not permit any sort of costume or any sort of props in our performances. So if you feel that they are being brought into the performance, then you can stop the performance and ask them to put down any props, but also you can just ignore the fact that they're there, because they're not really permitted. It's about oracy and acting, and not the use of external factors to support the performance. And again, remember that oracy, that bit of it is really, really important. Also think about the following. Does the performer understand what they're saying? Do they understand the character that they're portraying? Are they enjoying performing for you? And are you enjoying their performance? As somebody who's judged in the past, I always know that our really strong performance is one where I get to the end of their performance and realise that I've not really written very many notes, because I've sat back and I've just enjoyed their portrayal of the character and being taken into the world that they are transporting us into. And that's something that Shakespeare is absolutely fantastic at doing. Now, there's 4 categories that we are marking on: vocal skills, physical and technical skills, interpretation of text, and success in realizing artistic intention. So as Jess has mentioned, we need to take into account the timings in terms of the markings. So they need to introduce approximately 2 minutes, and then their performance extract should be approximately 3 minutes. And then the 4th criteria, the success in realizing artistic intention, we reflect that in the introduction that they have given us. So they introduce it, they perform it, and then at the end we need to think about, does their performance reflect that introduction that they gave to us? So we're looking at approximately 5 minutes. There's 5 performance grading, 5 being the highest, to help you work out the overall standard of each performance. We've got emerging talent, rising star, class act, leading light, and show stopping. And there's a really, really handy marking criteria worksheet in your judges handbook that will give you a breakdown of those. Now, the performances they're expected to colour their performances by bringing in vocal or physical skills and their interpretation of character or situation. So what you're looking for is use of pace, accent, inflection, intonation, pitch, and projection. And then the physical and technical skills are movement, so pace or stillness, what choices they make there, body language, facial expression, gesture, and space. And we also provide you with a mark sheet so that you can mark things down as you're going along. And those sort of headline things are noted on the mark sheet in advance for you. So you've got the space to write down your comments, and also you're judging things out of 5. So vocal, you're judging out of 5. Physical and technical, you're judging out of 5. Interpretation, you're judging out of 5. And then artistic intention, you're also judging out of 5. And remember that every now and again you will also get a duologue. So you need to make sure that when you're looking at a duologue, you're looking at the way that the 2 characters are working together to create a really effective scene between 2 characters. So how do the 2 work together, and how well are their performances blending with each other? And then the feedback. There are 2 types of feedback: general and individual. So when you're giving general feedback, then a really good method is the sandwich method. And again, this will be in your judge's handbook. So you're trying to be positive and critically encouraging. Pick out things that might be particularly challenging and suggest ways how our participants can improve on their performance without them feeling that they're being told off in any way. Praise and highlight the significance of what our participants have just achieved. Think about how well the student has fulfilled the role. Think about what areas they do well, and also think about what other techniques they might have used to make their performances stronger. Remember, some of these young people will be very emotionally affected by the decisions that you make. So always be sensitive in the judging feedback that you're giving them. Remember that there will be some very, very heightened emotions. And for some of these young people, they really are stepping out of their comfort zones. So just remember to stay friendly, to stay smiling, and also to remain sensitive about the feedback that you are giving them. So as we move on to the next screen, here are just a few little top tips for our judges. So make sure you arrive at the venue on time. I'm a complete stress head when it comes to preparing, making sure that I've got my route planned and making sure that I'm going to arrive at the venue on time, because otherwise I can become very, very stressed. So I do like to make sure that, well, sometimes I'm a little bit early, but very definitely make sure that you arrive on time to the venue. Make sure you have a pen that works, because it's really, really frustrating when you're trying to do those judges marking if your pen runs out, and if you've got a pencil that blunts itself. So do make sure that you've got a pen that works. Make sure that you smile when the young people are performing for you. So that's not sitting there grinning in a fixed way like the Joker, but smiling, enjoying, nodding, raising an eyebrow, laughing. Please feel free, if it's funny, to laugh at the performances that the young people are making, because they need to feel really comfortable that they are performing for you. If, like me, mental maths isn't your thing, then take a calculator. Don't be afraid to do that, because you will have to add those marks up very, very quickly sometimes. So do make sure that that's something that you've kept in mind. Be prepared to argue for your favourite. Not everybody will agree, but equally remember that you do need to compromise, because a decision ultimately needs to be made. As I said before, don't take too long in delivering your feedback. Remember, it's about the participants and not about you. So whilst it's good to reflect on your own personal experiences, it is all about the participants' performances. And finally, make sure that you absolutely sit back, relax, and enjoy this experience. You will be blown away, I absolutely guarantee, by some of these young people's performances. They are often absolutely jaw-dropping. They can be sensitive, they can be empowered, they can be insightful, they can be all sorts of emotions that you just never consider that you could possibly feel from the performance of a young person. They really, really are incredible. So sit back, relax, make sure you take your notes, but enjoy every single moment, because you never know, you may well be watching a future star of stage and screen in front of you. And it really should be an absolutely fantastic experience for you as a judge. I've been involved in the competition since 2013, and each year I come back excited to see what these young people are going to perform for us. Shakespeare is absolutely brilliant in allowing all sorts of different emotions, and you will absolutely be guaranteed to enjoy every single moment. So I think what we're going to do now is we're going to move on and show you an example of one of our absolutely fantastic winners. Was this from 2016, Jess?
I think so.
It's a young actor called Toby, or Tobias, as he says to us, and he really did blow the judges away at one of our, I think it was the last performance that we did, competition that we did in person before everything went online, down at Dartmouth House. Back, relax, and enjoy this one.
I'll just share it.
Hello, my name is Toby Fields, or Tobias. I don't particularly care. I'm doing Henry V, and I'm playing Henry V actually in Act 3, Scene 1. The reason I chose this play of all the ones, because I'm normally a comedian, I say jokes left and right. I saw this in Winchester Cathedral, I think that was called, yeah. I saw this and it really motivated me. I was so surprised at how this one man can round all these men, all of these people who, some of them are just farmers, they've barely fought before, and he can get them to fight for their lives. In plays prior to this, Henry is shown as being this rebellious teenager, always drinking out with his friends and going out to pubs and getting into trouble. But in this play, he's the king. That past life is behind him. But some people don't take him seriously, especially the French, who sent him tennis balls, thinking that it will surprise him and he will be mad. But he thinks he's a rightful heir to the throne. So, as everyone would, he invade France. In the scene that I'm doing, he's attacking a town called Harfleur, and his men have just been in a fight. They're outnumbered, the odds are stacked against them, and he still makes them fight once more. He calls his men dear friends. He's a king. He gets onto their level, and I think he got this from his times in the tavern drinking. He tells his men to act like tigers, and he tells them of their forefathers who fought alongside the king. This is so motivating, I think, because it shows that even if you don't have the resources, you don't have enough people, you can do anything. He won that battle, and he won lots of others afterwards. And I think I can get you to fight for me. Thank you. Once more into the breach, dear friends, once more, or close them all up with our English dead. In peace, there's nothing so becomes a man as modest stillness and humility. But when the blast of war blows in our ears, then imitate the action of a tiger, stiffen the sinews, summon up the blood, disguise fair nature with hard, favor, rage. Then lend the eye a terrible aspect. Let it pry through the porches of the head, like the brass cannon. Let the brow overwhelm it, as fearfully as doth a good rock. Oh, hanging jutty, its confounded base, swilled with the wild and wasteful ocean. Now, set the teeth and stretch the nostril wide. Hold hard the breath and bend up every spirit to its full height. On, you noblest English, whose blood was fed from fathers' war-proof. Fathers that, like so many Alexanders, have in these parts from morn till evening fought and sheathed their swords for lack of argument. Dishonour not your mothers. Now attest that those who you called fathers did forget you. Be copy now to men of grosser blood and teach them how to war! And you, good young, whose limbs were made you, show us here the method of your pasture, and let us swear that you are worth your breeding, which I doubt not. For there are none of you so mean and base that hath not noble lustre in your eyes. I see you stand like greyhounds in the slips, straining upon the start. The game's afoot. Follow your spirit, and upon this charge, cry God for Harry, England, and St. George!
Hope everyone enjoyed that. Would you like to say a little bit about the performance, Jen? And why it's
He was absolutely fantastic. He was just absolutely brilliant. And he really surprised us because he had sat backstage really quietly, really calmly, while some of the other participants were getting quite giddy and excited. Toby was just really calm, really quiet, and then just came out and blew our socks off. But as you can see, that oracy, that introduction that he made, that was something that really stood out for us. It was witty. He was interacting really nicely with the audience. He talked about himself. He talked about why he chose the performance, and then he dropped in that little bit of a, and I'm sure I can get all of you to fight for me thing, which completely made us all go, okay, fine, young man, bring this on. And then he did. And as you can see, he used different tones. in the speech, he moved, he dropped down really nicely to talk to his audience, which reflected the things that he said in the introduction about a young king talking to his soldiers and inspiring them to move forwards. So there was all of those different aspects that he brought into his performance that we would expect and that you will be able to see in the marking criteria. So that's a really, really good performance to kind of use as a bar level in your expectation of some of the really, really top-notch kind of star performer representations of one of Shakespeare's speeches that we would be looking for. You could see that he understood every word that he was saying, and he delivered it with that understanding, but also there were moments of sensitivity and there were moments of performance and power. And as he turned for that last moment, you could see he was really, really thinking about that young king leading his soldiers into battle. And it was something that really, really caught the judges' attention. And I think it was one of those moments where, whilst there were some absolutely fantastic performances, that was a real standout performance for all of us. So I'm hoping that that will have given you a little bit of an insight into the kind of performance and the marking criteria that we're looking at.
Definitely. So I think now, to sum up, we're going to move on to some questions. So if you do have a question, just pop it in the chat and we'll try our best to answer it. So Tina has asked, is a chair still permitted as a prop, which I believe it is. A chair is the only sort of prop that they can use. So yeah, they are permitted to use that. When
yes,
students...
Yeah, it's the... Sorry, Jessie, just to read it out, it says no scenery, props or furniture are permitted with the exception of one chair per performer only. So they can want, if it's a duologue, then obviously they're allowed 2 chairs each.
Yep. And then when students perform in a duologue, how do you reflect their performance when one of the pairs is considerably stronger than the other?
I think this is a point where the marking scheme comes into play, where you're marking them and bringing a combined score together for each of the performances. So you're looking at all of those different criteria, all of those different marking guidelines that we've given in the judges handbook, and using that to pull together the score. So it's using the score to show those different elements of the performances. So when you're looking at the performance, you can look at the relationship between the two, how effective that is, how they're working together, so that it's a combined score rather than just sort of thinking, oh well, if it's perhaps the nurse and Juliet's stronger than the nurse, thinking, oh, you know, that's not quite an equal performance. We're using that broad range of criteria to pull that scoring system together. I hope that helps.
Yeah, and then Neil has asked if finals are in person or on Zoom. They are going to be in person, and working through smoothing out the details of that now. So probably going to have some exciting news approaching, I hope. Does anyone else have any questions? Just feel free to put them in the chat, or we've got the separate Q&A box as well.
Yeah.
Okay, well, if anything does come up, as I've said, feel free to email me. I'll bring this webinar to an end now, and shortly in the next day, or if not Monday, I'm going to send out a pack of resources which will include hopefully the recording of this, the slides, our safeguarding policy, the judges handbook and the mark sheet, which will help you piece together a bit easier everything that we've talked through today. And once again, I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time to come along, and we really do hope that this has helped and has made people feel a bit more confident or a bit more refreshed as they go into May and start judging the regional finals. And more than anything else, that you enjoy them. I'm definitely looking forward to judging mine here. So yeah, thank you everyone, and hope you all have a good evening.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm likely to see most of you at the regional finals. So if you've got any questions in advance, then do please ask. And as Jess has said, sit back, relax, and enjoy every moment of it. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you.